The findings from this study raise critical concerns about the metabolic consequences of dietary protein restriction, particularly in the context of energy balance and long-term health. The increase in fibroblast growth factor 21, FGF21, and the corresponding rise in energy intake required to maintain body weight highlight an important but potentially problematic metabolic adaptation. While previous research in animal models suggested benefits, such as improved insulin sensitivity and extended lifespan with protein restriction, the translation of these effects to humans appears to be more complex and less universally beneficial. One of the most concerning aspects of this study is the significant increase in energy needs that arises when dietary protein is restricted, whether replaced by carbohydrates or fats. This suggests that individuals consuming low-protein diets may need to consume considerably more calories just to maintain their body weight, a requirement that could easily lead to overconsumption of other macronutrients and potential metabolic imbalances. Although the study controlled for caloric intake, real-world dietary habits are rarely as tightly regulated, meaning individuals following a protein-restricted diet may struggle to balance their energy intake appropriately. Furthermore, the rise in FGF21 levels raises questions about its long-term effects on metabolism and overall health. While FGF21 has been linked to beneficial metabolic adaptations in some contexts, sustained elevation could indicate a stress response rather than a positive physiological adaptation. The fact that fasting plasma FGF21 levels increased dramatically during the protein-restricted phase and then rapidly decreased when protein intake returned to normal suggests that this is a compensatory mechanism rather than a naturally sustainable metabolic state. Chronic alterations in FGF21 signaling could have unintended consequences, including disruptions in energy homeostasis, altered fat metabolism, or other hormonal imbalances that may not manifest immediately but could contribute to health issues over time. Additionally, while the study found no significant loss of lean body mass, it is worth considering that prolonged protein restriction could lead to muscle loss, especially in individuals with higher activity levels or aging populations where muscle preservation is critical. Protein plays a fundamental role in muscle maintenance, immune function, and overall cellular health. The assumption that a minimal protein intake is sufficient to maintain these functions may not hold true for everyone, particularly in cases where energy intake is not meticulously controlled as it was in this study. The study also challenges the notion that protein restriction inherently improves insulin sensitivity. Although a modest improvement was observed in individuals consuming a low-protein, high-carbohydrate diet, this effect was not present when protein was replaced with fat. This discrepancy suggests that insulin sensitivity improvements may not be a direct result of protein restriction itself, but rather due to other dietary factors, such as increased carbohydrate intake or shifts in lipid metabolism. The potential long-term impact of these metabolic shifts remains unclear, and there is a risk that prolonged dietary manipulation could lead to unintended consequences, such as altered glucose homeostasis or increased fat accumulation. Another alarming aspect is the potential difficulty in sustaining a diet that requires continuous adjustments to caloric intake. The study participants needed to increase their energy intake by nearly 20% over the 5-week protein-restricted phase to prevent weight loss. And once protein intake was restored, their energy needs dropped back to baseline. This level of dietary micromanagement is unrealistic for most individuals, particularly in free-living conditions where precise control over food intake is impractical. This also raises concerns about potential weight fluctuations, metabolic stress, and the psychological burden of constantly managing energy intake to maintain body weight. These findings should serve as a caution against overly simplistic dietary recommendations that emphasize protein restriction without fully understanding its broader metabolic implications. While some short-term benefits, such as increased energy expenditure, may be observed, the long-term sustainability and potential negative effects remain uncertain. The rapid metabolic shifts observed in response to dietary protein changes suggest that the human body is highly sensitive to alterations in macronutrient composition, and any drastic dietary modification should be approached with caution. In light of these concerns, Individuals considering protein-restricted diets should be mindful of the potential need for increased caloric intake, possible disruptions in metabolic regulation, and the long-term impact on muscle maintenance and overall health. More research is needed to determine whether the observed metabolic responses to protein restriction are truly beneficial or whether they indicate an underlying physiological stress that could have negative consequences over time. Until these uncertainties are resolved, a balanced approach that includes adequate protein intake tailored to individual needs remains the safest and most practical dietary strategy.